lead a film. And I was very excited. I was very happy that Mr. Kurihara here allowed me the chance to help bring his vision to life. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you all so much for showing up, especially around Dad. We're friends.
今日は皆さん来てくださってありがとうございます。このような機会を得れたのは監督のおかげです。そして今日来てくださった皆様のおかげです。特にお母さんとお父さん来てくださったことを感謝しています。皆さん今日は楽しんでみてください。です。I wanted to say exactly the same thing. Thank you so much for letting me be in this movie, Mr. Kurihara, and all the staff. Thank you so much for supporting me all through the shooting, and I'm very, very happy because, yes, to be standing here and this is my very, very first time to be an actress, and I appreciate everyone all my friends. To come here to my show. Thank you so much for coming. ありがとうございます。Please enjoy the movie. ありがとうございます。Okay.
Mitsuo, you say you want. First, I want to say Mitsuo Kurihara did an enormous great job to shoot this movie. We all know being an independent director, you always struggle with money, support, and acceptance of what you do. What's so incredible about him, let me talk for you. In all his movies, he chooses topics which are not, I would say, easy to digest, but they are important. And one of the topics in this movie now has a lot to do with the genocide 1994 in Rwanda. It is one of the topics, and Agatha, the lead, played by Marista, she came to Japan and grew up in an orphanage in Rwanda. My character, Muteli, I lead this orphanage, and I experienced the genocide in 1994. I will now read some topics so you might understand a bit about the political situation Mitsuo Kurihara is talking about in this movie. First, I want to say, Mitsuo and me, we want to really thank Jonathan Nimrod from America, who in an incredible interview told us about the genocide and especially about his social work he did. He used to be a professional basketball athlete in Africa and had to flee himself due to the war. He lost his brother, his father, and he still had the faith, the courage and the love to go back and help traumatized people. And what did he do? He used the symbol and ethic of sports that not only the victims but also the persecutors, they met and had to kind of find trust in themselves and together again. And I'm just going to read out some facts we had in this incredible, lovely interview. 1994, the genocide in Rwanda murdered in 100 days 1 million people. Rwanda is a tiny country in Central Africa and is one of the most densely populated countries in the continent and among the poorest in the world. It's made up of 3 tribes: the Hutus, the majority of the people, Tutsis, the minority, an extremely small number, the Tuareg. They were ruled first by the German colonists, followed by the Belgians, which favored the minority Tutsi aristocracy, but not because they think they were so nice, no. They had a good time because they were ensured a better education, mostly for managing the country to generate greater profit for the Belgians. They also introduced an ethnic identity card to distinguish between the 2 tribes, Hutu and Tutsi. But this deepened the rift between Hutu and Tutsi which in the end led to the first genocide in 1959, where already 100,000 Tutsis were killed, encouraged this time by the Belgians because they turned against them. In 1962, the Belgians pulled out of Rwanda and a Hutu government was placed, and Tutsis had become second-class citizens, facing persecution, violence, and death at the hands of Hutu extremists. Then followed another genocide in 1973. And if you now count, it's not even 20 years. Afterwards, radical political parties were springing up in many towns and cities, each violently opposed to the others. Out of this came up the Hutu extremist militia, and many of its members were trained to fight and kill. Especially unemployed young men had nothing better to do, as many were street gang members who joined the military because they became free drugs and alcohol. They were taught from an early age that Tutsis were inferior and not to be trusted, and that they do not belong to Rwanda. They began to destroy every Tutsi home. They came across and destroyed all Tutsis' documents, birth, marriage, and death certifications. It had to look like if they never existed. Each trace got erased. For a long time, none of the other countries came to stop the slaughter. The UN had even withdrawn its peacekeeping force shortly after the killing began. Belgium, the former colonial ruler, was the first to pull out its soldier out of the country after 10 peacekeepers were murdered by Hutu soldiers on the first day of the genocide. In fact, every Western country had evacuated its citizens from Rwanda when the killing started, leaving the Tutsis to face a fate alone. The United States would not even acknowledge that the genocide was happening. Also, the medias helped with their propaganda news that the Tutsis were hunted and killed. Government leaders had turned down every single Rwandan radio station into the propaganda death machine. In the end, it was France who were able to help those Tutsis who had survived the genocide. But it was more difficult than expected. Only if the Tutsi survivors could reach their camps, the French soldiers could protect them. That meant leaving a safe shelter to risk one's life outside, where the Hutu soldiers waiting to kill them on the way to the French camps. We also got a very incredible book recommended by Immaculée Bilibergassi. She wrote her book, Left to Tell. She herself lost all her family during the genocide in 1994. And she writes in her book, she came to Japan to introduce her book, her personal story, which can stand for these 1 million killed. And she met Japan's First Lady, who was more than overwhelmed and touched by her story. She took Immaculée aside and said, I want every child in Japan to read your book. The conflict and persecution you suffered because your race is like the kind of bullying many Japanese students encounter in school and university nowadays. Immaculée describes that it was not only the trained militia who had been tormenting her and her family, but also neighbors, friends, people she had gone to school with. She even could not trust her best friends anymore. Immaculée writes that it took over 20 years to repair a shattered economy, rebuild the burned-out homes, to heal the physical, psychological, and emotional wounds suffered by each survivor, including herself. Because unemployment was endemic, most survivors had lost their homes, their families. They had been forced to seek shelter in squalid displaced person camps where disease, rape, and hunger were facts of daily life. Refugees from 1959, 1973, and 1994 were returning to Rwanda from around the whole world. 1 million exiles returned, changing the sound and look of the country. But more than 2 million Hutus fled Rwanda, fearing their killings. How many years, how many generations does it take to recover from such a horror? Today it is known that the traumata is passed on the next 7 generations. Humanity is always wounded by a genocide. Rwanda is meant to be the most beautiful part of Africa. The German colonists called it the everyday spring. But it takes the whole love of the whole world that Rwanda can exist again. And that's what we heard in the interview with Jonathan Nimrod. It needs love, help, and support to help traumatized people. Thank you very much.
One thing about this movie is really long, 2 hours, which is you may fall asleep or that you may dislike.
Was my debut, and thank you so much for watching. This was actually my first time watching the movie, and yeah, it really moved my heart. So I did too wonder what you guys felt about it. So questions to Mr. Kurihara. Thank you.